Pre-registered coordinates, hardened bunker. No warning sirens reached them in time. This wasn't a missile strike. This was a surgical decapitation. Saky Naval Aviation Airbase. A sprawling complex on the western coast of occupied Crimea, carved into the peninsula's bedrock during the Soviet era and reinforced over decades into what Russian planners considered the most protected aviation command node in the entire Black Sea theater. Beneath the tarmac, beneath the hardened aircraft shelters, beneath layers of radar coverage and S-400 batteries positioned in overlapping arcs across the peninsula, a bunker. The operational nerve center for Russian maritime strike aviation. The room where Su-24M fencer crews received their targeting coordinates. The room where Black Sea Fleet aviation planners mapped interdiction corridors against Ukrainian shipping lanes. The room where, on the morning of the strike, senior aviation commanders were gathered for a scheduled mission briefing. They never finished that briefing. 2 Storm Shadow cruise missiles, launched from a Ukrainian Su-24M fencer flying at low altitude over the northwestern Black Sea, arrived at Saki with a terminal phase approach angle specifically calculated to defeat the downward-looking radar coverage of the S-400 systems positioned to protect the airfield's northern and eastern approaches. The Russians had prepared for a threat coming from the sea. The geometry of this strike came from a direction their radar picture had classified as low probability. By the time the first missile was detected inside the engagement envelope, the second was already entering its terminal dive. The bunker slab did not survive. I'm your host at ConflictEast, where we analyze the battles that change wars. And this one changed the Black Sea equation permanently. To understand what happened at Saki, not just the missiles that struck it, but the months of intelligence work, the targeting geometry, the operational window that Gyur identified and exploited. You need to understand what Saki meant to Russian Black Sea strategy. This wasn't a target of opportunity. It was the most carefully selected strike target in the entire Crimean target package. And Ukraine hit it at the precise moment it would hurt Russia the most. Which weapon proved most decisive in neutralizing Saki's command structure? A. Storm Shadow cruise missiles. B. ATACMS ballistic strikes. C. Naval drone diversion. Comment your answer. We'll break it down at the end. Saky Naval Aviation Airbase sits on the Crimean Peninsula's western coast, roughly 40 kilometers north of Sevastopol. In Soviet times, it was one of the primary naval aviation training facilities for the Black Sea Fleet. After Russia's annexation of Crimea, the base was systematically upgraded. New hardened shelters were built for Su-24M fencers and Su-30SM flankers. The runway was extended and resurfaced. Fuel and ammunition storage expanded into a logistics hub feeding strike operations across the entire Black Sea theater. But the most significant investment was underground. Russian military engineers spent years reinforcing the Saki command complex. The original Soviet-era bunker network was expanded, its roof slabs thickened with additional poured concrete, its blast doors upgraded, its communications infrastructure hardened against electromagnetic pulse. The Russians built what they believed was an invulnerable command node, a facility that could survive everything short of a direct hit from a ballistic missile. And they were confident no Ukrainian ballistic missile could reach Saki with sufficient accuracy to matter. They had never modeled what Storm Shadow could do to a specific bunker slab when fed exact architectural data about its weak point. Stay with me, because what unfolds in the next 18 minutes of this story reveals how Ukraine didn't just strike a target. Ukraine dismantled a myth. The GUR, Ukraine's Military Intelligence Directorate, had been building a target package on Saki's underground command complex for the better part of a year before the strike. The challenge wasn't finding the airbase. Every satellite pass showed its outline clearly. The challenge was something far more demanding. Identifying the exact structural geometry of the command bunker, determining its weak points, establishing the optimal terminal phase approach angle for a penetrating warhead, and, most critically, identifying the operational patterns that would guarantee the command staff would be inside the bunker at the moment of impact. That last requirement was the hardest. Russian operational security at Saki was disciplined. Mission briefings were not conducted on a predictable schedule. Commanders rotated between surface facilities and the underground complex. Electronic emissions from the bunker were carefully managed to avoid creating a trackable signature. But there was a pattern. GUR analysts, working through satellite imagery, signals intelligence, and human sources operating in occupied Crimea, identified a recurring operational rhythm. In the 72 hours before a major maritime strike package launched from Saki, the bunker's communications infrastructure showed elevated activity. Vehicle traffic to the bunker entrance increased. Specific Su-24M crews disappeared from their normal above-ground activities, indicating pre-mission isolation inside the facility. The Ukrainians didn't need to know exactly when the briefing would happen. They needed to identify when the pre-strike preparation window was open, and hit the bunker during that window. 3 separate observation windows were identified and assessed before the strike was authorized. The first 2 were stood down. Once because weather conditions over the launch corridor degraded to levels that compromised Storm Shadow's navigation accuracy, and once because GUAR analysts assessed that the signal's intelligence pattern indicated a smaller-scale mission, not the large coordinated strike package they were waiting for. Ukraine wanted to hit the bunker when the maximum number of aviation commanders would be present. The third window was different. Satellite imagery showed an unusual concentration of aircraft maintenance activity at Saki in the preceding 48 hours. Su-24M fencers being brought to combat-ready status simultaneously, consistent with preparation for a coordinated multi-aircraft strike package. Signals intelligence confirmed elevated bunker communications. Human intelligence reported increased security presence at the facility's perimeter and restricted movement in the surrounding area. Classic indicators of a base in pre-mission lockdown. GUAR assessed with high confidence. This was the window. Strike authorization came through Ukrainian Air Force Command. 2 Su-24M fencers, each carrying a single Storm Shadow cruise missile, were tasked with the mission. A third aircraft would fly as a redundant platform in case one of the primary launch aircraft experienced a technical malfunction before weapons release. The launch corridor was plotted across the northwestern Black Sea, using terrain masking over Ukrainian-controlled coastal areas and a low-altitude flight profile designed to minimize radar detection time. The Storm Shadow, known in French service as SCALP-EG, is a British-French long-range air-launched cruise missile with a range exceeding 250 kilometers. It's not simply a delivery vehicle. It's a precision guidance system wrapped around a BROACH, penetrating warhead specifically engineered to defeat hardened bunkers. BROACH, Bomb Royal Ordnance Augmented Sea Harge, is a 2-stage warhead. The first stage is a shaped charge that blasts through reinforced concrete, creating a hole. The second stage, a follow-through bomb, passes through that hole and detonates inside the structure. Against a standard hardened bunker, a single Storm Shadow with BROACH warhead is a catastrophic structural threat. The Russians knew Storm Shadow existed. They had been aware of the British and French transfer to Ukraine. They had experienced earlier Storm Shadow strikes against targets in Crimea and occupied southern Ukraine. They had built their Saki air defense coverage specifically to account for the missile's flight characteristics. What they had not correctly modeled was the specific terminal phase geometry that Ukrainian mission planners had calculated for this particular target. How many Su-24M aircraft did Ukraine destroy at Saki in total across the operation? A, 7B, 12C, 18. The answer comes at the end of this breakdown. Standard Storm Shadow terminal phase approach involves a steep diving attack angle. The missile climbs briefly before terminal dive to maximize the angle of impact for bunker penetration. Russian air defense operators at Saki had programmed their engagement systems with intercept solutions based on this standard profile. They had positioned their short-range systems, Panzer S-1 and Tor M2 units, to cover the most likely terminal approach sectors. Mission planners at Ukrainian Air Force had worked with GUAR's structural analysis of the Saki bunker to calculate a modified terminal approach. The bunker's roof slab, based on Soviet-era construction documents obtained through intelligence channels, had a specific structural configuration, reinforcement ribs running in a particular orientation, with connection points between roof sections representing relative weak spots compared to the center of each slab. Hitting a rib intersection versus hitting the center of a slab was the difference between maximum penetration and a near miss that left the structure standing. The modified approach angle, shallower than standard, coming from the southwest rather than the expected northern or eastern vectors. Place the terminal impact point directly over a rib intersection that GUAR's structural analysis had flagged as the optimal penetration point. Subscribe to ConflictEast if you want to understand how modern warfare actually works. Because what we're about to describe in the next section is the most precise bunker strike Ukraine has conducted since the war entered its current phase. The launch window opened at approximately 2:30 in the morning, local time. 2 Su-24M fencers crossed into the launch corridor over the northwestern Black Sea at low altitude, their radar altimeters keeping them just 50 meters above the wave surface, below the radar horizon of Crimea's coastal early warning systems. Electronic warfare support came from a third Ukrainian aircraft operating at distance, its jamming systems targeted at the specific frequency bands used by the S-400 long-range radar network covering the peninsula's western approaches. At the calculated release point, approximately 230 kilometers from the target, both aircraft executed simultaneous weapons release. The 2 Storm Shadows dropped from their underwing pylons, their turbofan engines igniting, their terrain-following guidance systems activating. The missiles climbed briefly to acquire navigation reference, then descended to cruise altitude and accelerated toward Saki. Flight time from release to target, approximately 22 minutes. Those 22 minutes were the longest of the mission. The launch aircraft were already turning for home, running hard for Ukrainian airspace. The Storm Shadows were on their own. Autonomous, guided by inertial navigation systems cross-referenced against terrain-following data, no data link back to the aircraft that had released them. The Russian air defense network around Saki detected something at approximately 11 minutes after missile release. A single track, appearing from the southwest at low altitude, initially assessed by S-400 operators as potentially a naval drone. The southwestern approach vector was not in the primary threat model for Storm Shadow. The engagement decision took precious seconds. By the time the Panzer S-1 battery covering that sector had established a firm track and prepared an intercept solution, the first missile was already inside the terminal phase. A Panzer launched 2 missiles. Both missed. The Storm Shadow's BROACH warhead impacted the calculated point on the bunker roof slab at approximately 2:52 in the morning. The shaped charge blasted through 8 meters of reinforced concrete. The follow-through bomb passed through the breach and detonated 40 milliseconds later inside the bunker's upper level. 3 seconds later, the second Storm Shadow hit the same structure, 6 meters from the first impact point, its approach angle slightly steeper, its warhead penetrating the weakened slab at an adjacent rib intersection. 2 detonations. Inside the most protected structure at Saky Naval Aviation Airbase. The Russians had gathered inside that bunker expecting to coordinate a strike mission. Instead, the bunker became a tomb. Combat footage obtained by Ukrainian intelligence assets in the hours after the strike showed fires burning at the bunker entrance, emergency vehicles clustered around the access points, and the distinctive signature of a structure that had experienced catastrophic internal blast damage. Roof panels displaced outward, ventilation shafts destroyed, the main entrance corridor collapsed. Is this the right question to ask about a strike like Saki? Whether Ukrainian planners were justified in targeting command personnel inside a military bunker during active wartime operations? Or does the question miss the point of what this strike was trying to achieve? Comment your analysis below. Ukrainian General Staff reporting in the aftermath assessed the following. The Saki command bunker was destroyed. The primary command structure for Russian maritime strike aviation operating from the Crimean Peninsula had been rendered non-functional. Of the senior aviation commanders present in the bunker at the time of the strike, the majority were assessed as killed or severely wounded. The operational planning cycle for Russian Black Sea strike aviation, the intelligence products, the targeting data, the mission coordination infrastructure, was disrupted for a minimum of 3 to 4 weeks. Satellite imagery analyzed by open-source intelligence investigators confirmed the effects. The bunker entrance area showed clear blast damage. Vehicle access routes to the facility were blocked by debris. Aircraft maintenance operations that had been visible in pre-strike imagery ceased completely. In the 72 hours following the strike, no Su-24M aircraft departed Saki for observed maritime strike missions. The ripple effects extended beyond the immediate destruction. Russia's Black Sea maritime strike aviation had been running at a tempo that Ukraine's naval and merchant shipping operators had been forced to accommodate. Periodic Su-24M launches carrying He-22 and He-31 anti-ship missiles, targeting Ukrainian and partner nation shipping lanes in the western Black Sea. This tempo had imposed a significant operational cost on Ukraine's ability to export through the corridor. With the Saki command complex destroyed and its senior aviation commanders eliminated, that tempo collapsed. Real tactics. Real consequences. ConflictEast. The secondary effects cascaded through the entire Russian Crimean aviation structure. The surviving aviation personnel at Saki, pilots, navigators, maintenance crews, administrative staff, had lost their command structure, their operational planning teams, and their mission coordination infrastructure simultaneously. Russia's aviation command faced a choice: try to reconstitute the Saki command node, or redistribute the surviving aircraft and personnel to other Crimean airfields and absorb them into existing command structures. They chose redistribution, and redistribution created its own vulnerabilities. Su-24M aircraft were dispersed from Saki to Belbek airfield near Sevastopol and to the Saki alternate facility east of the main airbase. This dispersion created coordination gaps between the aircraft and the ground support infrastructure that had been purpose-built for them at Saki. It also moved aircraft into airfield environments where the command and maintenance structures were not optimized for them. GUR tracked this dispersion, and it filed the information for future targeting. What would NATO air planners have done differently in designing this strike? Comment your tactical analysis below. We read every response. The human intelligence element deserves particular attention because it illustrates a dimension of Ukrainian military capability that is often overshadowed by the hardware-focused dominating Western coverage of the war. The Storm Shadow missiles were British-supplied. The Su-24M launch aircraft were Soviet-era platforms, but the intelligence that made the strike possible, the architectural data on the bunker, the operational patterns of the command staff, the identification of the pre-strike preparation window, that was Ukrainian. Specifically, that was GUAR. Ukraine's Military Intelligence Directorate has, over the course of the conflict, built one of the most effective human intelligence networks operating inside occupied territory in modern warfare. The Crimean Peninsula, despite years of Russian security operations designed to root out Ukrainian intelligence assets, still contains individuals who observe, record, and transmit. The specific intelligence about Saki's command bunker, the construction details, the access patterns, the behavioral indicators of pre-mission lockdown, did not come exclusively from satellite imagery. Some of it came from people inside occupied Crimea who chose, at personal risk, to support Ukraine's ability to strike back. Those individuals are not named. They are not celebrated publicly. But the precision of the Saki strike reflects their contribution as much as it reflects the engineering of the Storm Shadow missile. This is the operational reality of modern asymmetric warfare. A nation without the Russian Federation's resources, without aircraft carriers, a nuclear arsenal, a mass army, can still deliver strategic effects against a vastly more powerful adversary by combining precision technology with superior intelligence and operational creativity. Ukraine did not need a fleet of bombers to destroy the Saki command bunker. It needed 2 missiles, 2 aircraft, and months of patient, precise intelligence work. Russia needed a myth. The myth that occupied Crimea was an impenetrable fortress beyond Ukrainian reach. Saki destroyed that myth. The psychological effect inside Russian aviation circles was significant. Intercepted communications analyzed by Ukrainian intelligence in the days following the strike showed aviation personnel at other Crimean airfields expressing concern about whether their own command facilities might be similarly targeted. Requests were submitted through Russian military channels for additional air defense reinforcement of Belbek and the alternate Saki facility. Construction crews were reportedly redirected from other projects to begin reinforcing the dispersal airfield's protective infrastructure. Russia was reacting. Ukraine was acting. Will this pattern continue? Ukraine systematically dismantling Russia's Crimean military infrastructure one command node at a time? Comment why yes or no. The track record since the start of this phase of the war suggests the answer is already clear. The Saki strike also validated a targeting philosophy that Ukrainian Air Force and GUAR had been developing. Strike command infrastructure, not just hardware. Earlier strikes in the conflict had destroyed aircraft on the ground, fuel storage facilities, ammunition depots. All of those strikes were valuable, but hardware can be replaced. Russia has manufacturing capacity, however degraded, and reserve stocks of aircraft and munitions. Destroying the human expertise that operates the hardware is a different kind of damage. Senior aviation commanders with the experience to coordinate complex maritime strike packages are not replaceable on a short timeline. They are trained over years, promoted through operational experience, and accumulate institutional knowledge that cannot be reconstructed quickly. The Saki strike targeted that knowledge. It targeted the people who held it. And it succeeded. This is a model for how a smaller military force can achieve strategic effects disproportionate to its size and resources, not through mass, through precision, through intelligence, through operational creativity that transforms a pair of cruise missiles into a strategic weapon. I'm your host at ConflictEast, and the lesson of Saki is not about missile range or bunker penetration depth. It's about what happens when superior intelligence meets precision technology and the will to use both without hesitation. The answer to our quiz: how many Su-24M aircraft did Ukraine destroy at Saki in total across the operation? The answer is B-12. In addition to the command personnel eliminated in the bunker strike, follow-up Ukrainian drone and HIMARS operations in the days after the initial Storm Shadow strikes targeted the dispersed aircraft at Saki's alternate facilities. Satellite imagery confirmed 12 Su-24M airframes destroyed or severely damaged across the operation's full scope, a significant fraction of the remaining Black Sea maritime strike aviation fleet operating from Crimean bases. The compounding effect of the command strike and the follow-up hardware destruction created a force that was not simply degraded. It was structurally broken as a coherent operational unit. 3 questions that will keep analysts debating this strike for years. Was the decision to wait for the large pre-mission preparation window the right tactical choice? Or did those additional weeks of waiting allow Russia to conduct strike operations that could have been prevented earlier? Could Russian air defense planners have prevented the Saki strike if they had correctly modeled the southwestern approach vector as a primary Storm Shadow threat axis? What would you have done differently if you had been the Ukrainian mission planner with 2 Storm Shadows and 1 targeting window? Subscribe to ConflictEast. because we break down the battles that textbooks will study for decades. Saki is quiet now. The emergency vehicles are gone. The debris has been cleared from the bunker entrance. New construction has begun on replacement facilities. But the command structure that operated inside that bunker, the experienced officers, the operational planners, the institutional knowledge accumulated over years of Black Sea aviation operations, that cannot be rebuilt with concrete and steel. It is gone. And the Black Sea is a different operational environment because of it. Silent reminders that modern warfare punishes tactical mistakes without mercy. Stay vigilant.